this webinar today, and we're going to be splitting the time between us. Got myself, Joseph Hubbard, we have our international director, John Mackay, and we also have our resident medical biologist, Dr. Diane Eager, with us as well from all over the world. I'm originally from England, probably tell by the accent, but I'm not actually broadcasting from England. I am broadcasting from Iceland, where I am currently on my honeymoon. I got married a couple of weeks ago, and this is part of our. We were grateful enough to be able to actually come here to Iceland, and so I'm going to be speaking a little bit about climate tonight with Iceland, in reference to that. What we're going to do, basic sort of plan, we're roughly aiming at about 10 minutes per speaker for each segment. I'm going to start off, and then we'll have a short time for a Q&A. Then I'll hand over to Dr. Diane Eager for her segment, and then it'll be John Mackay, and it'll be a sort of a short Q&A segment in between each one. We have got up to 3 segments that we'll try and get through tonight. We'll see how time goes and see how the Q&A session goes. If we get no questions in the slightest, we can whiz through all 3 of them. But if we get bogged down with plenty of questions, which is fantastic, and it'll be great if we have that many questions, then we may have to stick it with just a couple. If you would like to ask questions, you can still email them in to us on the link that you should have got when you registered for this Zoom meeting, or alternatively, and a lot easier, if you go to the chat and just type your message into the chat, send it to us, then we will be able to see your question and we will be able to answer it when the appropriate time comes. So if you do have any questions, please do ask. It makes our job a lot easier. If we have questions coming through sort of live, so to speak, we've got a couple of questions that were asked beforehand, which we can fall back on if we need to, but please do ask questions as we move on forward, and that would be wonderful. Okay, I'm going to start. So let's see if I can get my screen to share. Let's just see now. Okay, John Mackay, as the host, you need to make me host so that I can share my screen.
Right now. Okay, you should now be the host.
Wonderful. Let's try sharing my screen. There we go. Share the screen. Let's go up to
my screen. You
don't. Okay, can one of the panelists let me know if they can see my screen? Yes. Creation Research UK, lovely job, creationresearchuk.com. That's our UK website. You can also find out if you're from international, you can just go to creationresearch.net, and all the websites are all interconnected, so you can find out more about our work and what we are doing. Another quick little advert. If you probably know about already, if you've joined through the evidence news that we have out, we have these evidence news and creation news which comes out every so often, every few weeks. It's well worth getting them, and they're absolutely free, so go to creationresearch.net and find out more about that there. We're going to start with a warning. Who said this? Beware of false science, it leads you astray. The answer? The Apostle Paul did to Timothy in 1 Timothy 6:20. Okay, that's not a quote or a absolute quote from the King James Version. That's sort of a paraphrase. But what is interesting is that Paul does use that word science there. Yes, science is the old word for knowledge. Beware of false science, beware of false knowledge. And Paul's warning to Timothy in 1 Timothy 6:20 is that false science, false knowledge will lead you astray. You see, I'm currently in Iceland at the minute, as I just mentioned. There's me with my new wife, and we are outside one of the largest waterfalls in the country there on the island, and it's absolutely fabulous. The scenery around here is absolutely wonderful. You can get some amazing stuff as you go around, including this great big glacier. This is down on the south of the island. We've been staying down in Vik, which is way down on the southern tip of the island. It's the wettest part of the island, and it rained most days, but we managed to get a nice clear day in which we went up to go and see this glacier. You see, when we came into the country, we had to stay in isolation for a little while, and so we were allowed to go out and go walking and go hiking. So we thought we'd make the most of it and go and see some scenery, and here's one of those beautiful pieces of scenery. You can see how the glacier sort of snakes down through the valley. It is really very wonderful and beautiful. Of course, glaciers have had a lot of media attention in recent years, particularly to do with this global warming and climate change. So what we're going to try and do today is give you not just an idea of the real facts, not just an idea of the real history of weather and climate, but also give you a biblical point of view. Media hit: Extinction of Glaciers in Iceland, published in the BBC News in August last year, August 2019. Here's what it said: Iceland's glacier commemorated with a plaque. Mourners have gathered in Iceland to commemorate the loss of this glacier, which was officially declared dead in 2014 when it was no longer thick enough to move. Published last year. Hey, we're going out to see this glacier in the next couple of days. I was hoping to get out there to be able to have some photos for this webinar, but we didn't have the chance. But it's actually just a couple of hours drive from where we're staying here in Reykjavik. So we're going to head out there and have a look. But here's the Google satellite view. The top one is in September 1986. You can see there's a fairly decent glacier there. Oh, you also see the crater? Yes, this glacier, like many of the glaciers here in Iceland, sit on top of a volcano. Iceland has become to be known as the land of ice and fire, and it really is true, because there are many, many volcanoes around, many of these wonderful hot springs and geysers which blow the hot steam and the water out into the air, but there are many glaciers as well. In fact, nearly 10% of Iceland is glacier. But if you have a look at the modern picture, you can see from the NASA observatory, it's practically gone by August 2019. There's hardly any ice left at all. Global warming? Earth's warming up. It's our fault. We're destroying the glaciers. The poor polar bears have got nowhere to live. Really? Well, let's delve a little bit deeper. Of course, you do get in these media hits, these media reports, a few little interesting comments, like this guy, this native Icelander, who said 150 years ago, no Icelander would have been bothered the least to see all the glaciers disappear as they advanced over farmlands and flooded whole areas with meltwaters and streams. Hey, you can get a lot from that. First of all, this glacier melting is not as bad, anywhere near as bad as you think it is, according to the media. Many people around here in Iceland would be very happy to get rid of the glaciers, because one thing they're now realizing is they're being able to grow crops for the first in many, many years. Certainly the first in living memory. They've been able to grow barley and wheat and be able to make bread and be able to, hey, if you know one thing about when you visit Iceland, it is extortionately expensive to eat. Even, I mean, I grew up in a very sort of frugal family. We don't go out to expensive restaurants and things like that. We like to get our own food and make it. But, you know, just getting basic groceries is extremely expensive here because there is no real way of, self-sustaining your farming and your growing here in Iceland because of the weather. But now in years, yes, it is getting a bit warmer. They're starting to be able to produce their own crops. The other thing you can get from this is quite simple. 150 years ago, the glaciers were growing, and they were growing very, very fast indeed. Mourners have gathered in Iceland to commemorate the loss of this glacier, which has died at the age of 700. The glacier was officially declared dead in 2014 when it was no longer thick enough to move. Did you catch it? The glacier is 700 years old. In other words, it was born in the 1300s and it died in the 2000s. But then don't be surprised. As we go on, we're going to have a look at the true history of weather, and we're going to use Britain as an example. And it's absolutely wonderful because Britain has a very long history and a very detailed history, including a history of the weather. And you can see that, yes, Earth's climate has gone up, it's gone down, it's gone up, it's gone down. This glacier started 700 years ago. It expanded, it retracted, it expanded, retracted, and today it's retracted so much it's practically gone. But is that the same story for all glaciers? Well, no. This was a media myth if you like. This was published just a couple of years ago, nearly just under 2 years ago, by the University of Iceland. Iceland's major glaciers have all expanded in the last 12 months, and they are expected to continue. Yes, one thing you find if you look at the map of Iceland's glaciers, there's a couple up in the north, but the big ones are they're over in the east and down in the south. Yet all of them have grown very significantly. They've begun to take back if you go there, we visited this glacier and we saw on the plaques there, oh, it's been going downhill, it's been melting, it's been retreating. Well, actually, if you go onto the University of Iceland statistics and you actually have a look at them, yeah, they're growing, and they're growing fairly quickly. In fact, it's not just in Iceland. This is one that was published again last year. In Greenland, major Greenland glacier is growing, and this glacier is growing for the third year in a row, and scientists attribute the change to cool ocean waters. There it is there. Yeah, it's growing. And you can see the arm that comes down. You see that photo which I had up earlier of me going and standing next to a glacier, that was an arm as well. And it's growing. You can see where it's continuing to push outwards. There were several icebergs which had broken off where the front had carved and fallen in. Yes, this is growing without a shadow of a doubt. But you don't hear about this in the media, do you? You hear, oh, bad, melt, polar bears going extinct and all the rest of it. You need to have a full picture. And you also need to understand the bias that there is in the media as well. We're not getting into conspiracy theories tonight, but there is certainly a bias in the media with projecting particular types of information to you. Media, false information. Paul's warning to Timothy, beware of false science, beware of false information, beware of false knowledge, because it will lead you astray. Yes, there is false information out there, and here's some wonderful proof of it. 31st of October 2018, Nature. Quantification of ocean heat uptake and changes in atmospheric O2 and CO2 composition. Now, let's face it, not many of you understood that, did you? I'm not even sure if I fully understood that. But if you read through the technical jargon and get through it all, you find out that what they are actually claiming is that oceans are warming at a far greater rate than previously believed, and it's all due to man-made climate change. The oceans are getting warm, the glaciers are melting, the icebergs are melting, and we are to blame. That's the claim. And it hit the media everywhere. BBC News, the New York Times, CNN, the Washington Post, it went everywhere. And they were all saying this is our fault. I mean, look at some of these headlines. Unexpected heat, 60% more heat, climate change. Well, what's actually interesting is within days of Nature actually publishing this, this statistician, Nicholas Lewis, found very serious errors with his calculations. And he showed that actually the calculations were so flawed that ocean warming is no greater than any previous estimates. It took nearly a year until on the 25th of September, Nature published a retraction note. And the retraction note was a small little paragraph hidden in the back corner of Nature. Guess how much media coverage there was for that retraction note? Absolutely nothing whatsoever. And yet the year previously, people had been led to believe that we are to blame for climate change. The ocean is warming up. Here's the proof. Look at this. And it is destroying our world. When the reality is, it was false science. It was false information. It was fake news, as one particular president likes to put it. But it really was. This is deception. This is a problem, and the worst part about it is that because it was spread everywhere in the media, the retraction was practically unseen. Interesting. Our final little biblical point when we're dealing with climate change, and we're going to get more into the ups and downs of climate change, but let's give it a biblical spin before I finish for question and answer session and I hand over to Dr. Diane Eager. An IQ test. Oh, we can't quite have people come in and shout out questions and have prizes normally do in a live audience, but please do pray for more opportunities for a live audience, because with the current COVID-19 pandemic, it's becoming increasingly difficult to even begin to plan for the future of ministry. And I'm sure you'll all agree that sitting in front of your computer screen is not quite the same as standing up and preaching in a church. I was speaking to John Mackay just yesterday, I think it was, and saying about how I'd had my first ever church meeting in 2020 in the UK a few weeks back, just as the sort of the exit strategy in the UK was just taking hold, and before we went back down into a sort of another lockdown, I got a chance to share at church, and it was so wonderful to get up on the stage and preach. It was a real wonderful feeling. So please do pray as we move forward. But let's have a think through this IQ test. What have the following got in common? Noah at the age of 602, Abraham when he went to Egypt, Joseph at age 39, Jacob at age 130, and Moses at age 80. Have a think about it. They all have one thing in common. What could it possibly be? The answer is climate change. Yes, each one of these men experienced a version of climate change, and bearing in mind this is during sort of the what would be classed in archaeology as the Bronze Age. There's no factories, no machinery, no great steam engines or coal-fired ovens, or cars and pollution and factories. Yet each of these men experienced quite severe climate change. Have a look. Genesis 8:22. Noah. God promised Noah that as long as the earth shall remain, day, night, cold, heat, summer, winter will continue until the world ends. Climate change. Yes, I do hope you realize when you're dealing with climate change and you're giving a biblical picture of climate, the first real climate change was during the flood, a worldwide catastrophe which changed the earth's surface forever, including its climate. It was originally a very good world. Sin corrupted, changed the patterns. So now we have day, night, cold, summer, and we have been promised that we will have that until the world ends. Abraham, Genesis 12. And there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was grievous in the land. Any evidence for this? Well, yes, there is actually, not just from the Bible, which is our ultimate evidence, but what you understand, you take God's word as true and you start looking into history and archaeology and science, all of the facts tally up perfectly with what you see in the Bible. One thing that I encourage people to understand is that there is absolutely no fact that contradicts the word of God. It's only the interpretations, opinions, thoughts, and ideas of mankind. If you have something which is incompatible with the Bible, it's either because you don't understand it, or it's because, hey, there's several interpretations there which have got nothing to do with the fact, and they are what are stopping you from sort of tallying it up with the Bible. Have a look at this history corresponding with the 4.2 to 3.9 BP, that stands for before present, which is around 2200 to 1900 BC. Abrupt climate change to a more arid climate has been recorded. You realize these dates tally up perfectly with the time that Abraham went to Egypt? Professor of Near Eastern Archaeology at Yale, beginning around 4200 before present, sudden demise of civilizations, including Mesopotamia, Canaan, and other Middle Eastern regions. Wow. Evidence that the Bible is true. But then don't be surprised, it's the word of God. There's the sort of general area. And look what else they say. Now confirmed by sediment from the Gulf of Oman, Tel Lian, and Lake Van in Turkey. That's all around there. Hey, they're finding real sediments. In fact, you don't just have to go on the real sediments, you don't just have to go on the Bible, you don't just have to go on the archaeology, you can also look into the history of literature. Climate change in Mesopotamia, this is a poem where it talks about the large fields and acres produce no grain, the flooded fields produce no fish, the watered gardens produce no honey and wine, the heavy clouds did not rain, on its plains where grew fine plants, lamentation reeds now grow. You realize that much of history is written down into poems and sort of stories. Yes, without a shadow of doubt, there was major climate change, there was a plague, there was a drought, and Abraham had to go to Egypt. It's now clear that after a period with quite humid and a warm climate, the precipitation greatly diminished after 4,002 years before present in the littoral zone of the eastern Mediterranean. No doubt, Abraham went to Egypt. Joseph, when he was 39, was in Egypt, and there was a drought. There was climate change. That's why Joseph was sent there by God. No, it wasn't his brothers who really sent him there. It was part of God's great plan, because you see, God's great plan was to save the children of Israel so that he could send a savior through them. No, it wasn't the brothers that sent Joseph to Egypt. It was God. And he went there to save them from climate change. Jacob at 130, he was in Egypt as well because of climate change. But of course, you do have to ask the question, why were they actually in Egypt? Oh, I've alluded to it just a second ago, but you have to understand God is a sovereign God. That's another important thing to realize when you're dealing with climate. No, we're not in charge of climate. God is. Why did they go to Egypt? Why was Abraham in Egypt? Why was Joseph in Egypt? Why was Jacob in Egypt? The answer is there in Matthew 2:15 and in Hosea 11:1. Out of Egypt I called my son. You do realize that God's sovereign plan was always to have Egypt as a part of the salvation of mankind, because not only did he call the children of Israel there, the prophecy that he would call his son out of Egypt. It's the same reason why Mary and Joseph ended up going to Egypt with baby Jesus, because out of Egypt God would call his son. Yes, the prophecy is there, and you can see God's sovereign hand of grace woven down through the layers of history when you actually read the Bible and match it up to real accounts. Moses, oh, hang on a minute. Where did Abraham and Jacob come from? The land of Canaan, the promised land. Why did they leave Canaan? Because there was a drought. There was no food. Moses, skip forward a couple hundred years. All of a sudden, Canaan is a land flowing with milk and honey. You do realize that in order to have milk, you need cows. In order to have cows producing good milk, you need grass. But you don't just need tough old dry grass, you need lush grass, beautiful grass. In order to have honey, you need bees. In order to have honey from bees, you need flowers. Wonderful flowers, beautiful flowers, which means you need the right climate. All of a sudden, Canaan is no longer a desolate, dry, barren place. It's a land flowing with milk and honey. Yeah, the climate had changed again. A reminder, go to creationresearch.net, click on Fact File and search climate. You'll find masses of information from all of our past reports that we've done. Same for askjohnmackay.com, and you can find a wonderful amount of information there as well.